Hello children, how are you? I hope you all are hale and hearty. Well, I'm Satinder Kaur and today I'll be taking up lesson 5 from the book Social and Political Life for class 8. And the name of the lesson is Judiciary. Children, if you remember, in the previous unit, we learnt about the rule of law, which means that laws apply equally to all persons. Now, the question is, who enforces these laws? Children, to enforce laws, we have a judicial system that consists of courts that a citizen can approach when a law is violated. Now, what do these courts do? How do they function? And are they independent to function? This lesson will answer all these questions. So, let's start and first talk about the functions performed by the courts. Children, courts take decisions on a very large number of issues. They can decide that no teacher can beat a student or about the sharing of river waters between states, or they can punish people for particular crimes. Broadly speaking, the work that the judiciary does can be divided into three categories. First and foremost function of the courts is dispute resolution. The judicial system provides a mechanism for resolving disputes between citizens and the government, between two state governments, and between the center and state governments. Next, as the final interpreter of the Constitution, the judiciary also has the power to strike down particular laws passed by the Parliament if it believes that these are a violation of the basic structure of the Constitution. This is called judicial review. Courts also play a crucial role in upholding the law and enforcing fundamental rights. Every citizen of India can approach the Supreme Court or the High Court if they believe that their fundamental rights have been violated. For example, in the class 7 book, you read about Hakim Sheikh, an agricultural laborer who fell from a running train and injured himself, and whose condition got worse because several hospitals refused to admit him. On hearing his case, the Supreme Court ruled that Article 21, which provides every citizen the fundamental right to life, also includes the right to health. It therefore directed the West Bengal government to pay him compensation for the loss suffered, as well as to come up with a blueprint for primary health care with particular reference to treatment of patients during an emergency. Now, imagine a situation in which a powerful politician has encroached on land belonging to your family. Within this judicial system, the politician has the power to appoint and dismiss a judge from his office. When you take this case to court, the judge is clearly partial to the politician. The control that the politician holds over the judge does not allow for the judge to take an independent decision. This lack of independence would force the judge to make all judgments in favor of the politician. Although we often hear of rich and powerful people in India trying to influence the judicial process, the Indian Constitution protects against this kind of situation by providing for the independence of the judiciary. What this means here is that other branches of government, the legislature and the executive, cannot interfere in the work of the judiciary. The courts are not under the government and do not act on their behalf. For the above separation to work well, it is also crucial that all the judges in the High Court as well as the Supreme Court are appointed with very little interference from these other branches of the government. Once appointed to this office, it is also very difficult to remove a judge. It is the independence of the judiciary that allows the courts to play a central role in ensuring that there is no misuse of power by the legislature and the executive. It also plays a crucial role in protecting the fundamental rights of citizens because anyone can approach the courts if they believe that their rights have been violated. Now, let's move ahead and look at the structure of courts in India. The structure of the courts from the lower to the highest level is such that it resembles a pyramid. There are three different levels of courts in our country. There are several courts at the lower level while there is only one at the apex level. The courts that most people interact with are what are called subordinate or district courts. These are usually at the district or tehsil level or in towns and they hear many kinds of cases. Each state is divided into districts that are presided over by a district judge. Each state has a high court which is the highest court of that state. At the top is the Supreme Court that is located in New Delhi and is presided over by the Chief Justice of India. The decisions made by the Supreme Court are binding on all other courts in India. Do you know, children, that high courts were first established in the three presidency cities of Calcutta, Bombay and Madras in 1862. The High Court of Delhi came up in 1966. Currently, there are 25 high courts. While many states have their own high courts, Punjab and Haryana share a common high court at Chandigarh. And four northeastern states of Assam, Nagaland, Mizoram and Arunachal Pradesh have a common high court at Guwahati. Andhra Pradesh and Telangana have separate high courts from January 1, 2019. Some high courts have benches in other parts of the state for greater accessibility. Now, are these different levels of courts connected to each other? Yes, they are. In India, we have an integrated judicial system, meaning that the decisions made by higher courts are binding on the lower courts. Another way to understand this integration is through the appellate system that exists in India. This means that a person can appeal to a higher court if they believe that the judgment passed by the lower court is not just. Let us understand what we mean by the appellate system by tracking a case, State versus Lakshman Kumar and others, from the lower courts to the Supreme Court. In February 1980, Lakshman Kumar married 20-year-old Sudha Goyal and they lived in a flat in Delhi with Lakshman's brothers and their families. On 2nd December 1980, Sudha died in hospital due to burns. Her family filed a case in court. When this case was heard in the trial court, 4 of her neighbors were called in as witnesses. They stated that on the night of December 1, they had heard Sudha scream and had forced their way into Lakshman's flat. There they saw Sudha standing with her sari in flames. They extinguished the fire by wrapping Sudha in a gunny bag and a blanket. Sudha told them that her mother-in-law Shakuntala had poured kerosene oil on her and that her husband Lakshman had lit the fire. During the trial, members of Sudha's family and a neighbor stated that Sudha had been subjected to torture by her in-laws and that they were demanding more cash, a scooter and a fridge on the birth of the first child. As part of their defense, Lakshman and his mother stated that Sudha's sari had accidentally caught fire while she was heating milk. On the basis of this and other evidence, the trial court convicted Lakshman and his mother Shakuntala and his brother-in-law Subhash Chandra and sentenced all 3 of them to death. In November 1983, the 3 accused went to the High Court to appeal against this verdict of the trial court. The High Court, after hearing the arguments of all the lawyers, decided that Sudha had died due to an accidental fire caused by the kerosene stove. Lakshman, Shakuntala and Subhash Chandra were acquitted, which means the court declared them not guilty of the crime which they were tried for. Now, the above High Court judgment deeply troubled women and they held demonstrations and filed a separate appeal against this High Court decision in the Supreme Court through the Indian Federation of Women Lawyers. In 1985, the Supreme Court heard this appeal against the acquittal of Lakshman and the two members of his family. The Supreme Court heard the arguments of the lawyers and reached a decision that was different from that of the High Court. They found Lakshman and his mother guilty but acquitted the brother-in-law Subhash because they did not have enough evidence against him. The Supreme Court decided to send the accused to prison for life. Now, let's move ahead and talk about the different branches of the legal system. Now, the case we just discussed falls within what is considered a crime against society and is a violation of criminal law. In addition to criminal law, the legal system also deals with civil law cases. Before we move further, let's understand some of the significant differences between criminal and civil law. First, criminal law deals with conduct or acts that the law defines as offences. For example, theft, harassing a woman to bring more dowry, murder, etc. Whereas civil law deals with any harm or injury to the rights of the individuals. For example, disputes relating to sale of land, purchase of goods, rent matters, divorce cases, etc. Next, a criminal case usually begins with the lodging of an first information report, better known as FIR, with the police who investigate the crime, after which a case is filed in the court. And if found guilty, the accused can be sent to jail and also fined. Whereas in a civil case, a petition has to be filed before the relevant court by the affected party only. In a rent matter, either the landlord or tenant can file a case. In this type of cases, the court gives the specific relief asked for. For instance, in a case between a landlord and a tenant, the court can order the flat to be vacated and pending rent to be paid. Children, I hope the difference between civil and criminal cases is clear to you. So children, did you see how our courts function in a systematic and independent manner to provide justice to people? But do you think everyone has access to the courts? Well, in principle, all citizens of India can access the courts in this country. This implies that every citizen has a right to justice through the courts. As you read earlier, the courts play a very significant role in protecting our fundamental rights. If any citizen believes that their rights are being violated, then they can approach the court for justice to be done. While the courts are available for all, in reality, access to courts has always been difficult for a vast majority of the poor in India. Legal procedures involve a lot of money and paperwork as well as take up a lot of time. For a poor person who cannot read and whose family depends on a daily wage, the idea of going to court to get justice often seems remote. In response to this, the Supreme Court in the early 1980s devised a mechanism of public interest litigation or PIL to increase access to justice. It allowed any individual or organization to file a PIL in the High Court or the Supreme Court on behalf of those whose rights were being violated. The legal process was greatly simplified, and even a letter or telegram addressed to the Supreme Court or the High Court could be treated as a PIL. In the early years, PIL was used to secure justice on a large number of issues such as rescuing bonded laborers from inhuman work conditions and securing the release of prisoners in Bihar who had been kept in jail even after their punishment term was complete. Did you know that the midday meal that children now receive in government and government-aided schools is because of a PIL? Now, let's look at how this happened. In 2001, the drought in Rajasthan and Orissa meant that millions faced an acute shortage of food. Meanwhile, the government godowns were full of grain. Often, this was being eaten away by rats. In this situation of hunger amidst plenty, an organization called the People's Union of Civil Liberties filed a PIL in the Supreme Court. It stated that the fundamental right to life guaranteed in Article 21 of the Constitution included the right to food. The state's excuse that it did not have adequate funds was shown to be wrong because the godowns were overflowing with grains. The Supreme Court ruled that the state had a duty to provide food to all. It therefore directed the government to provide more employment to provide food at cheaper prices through the government ration shops and to provide midday meals to children. It also appointed 2 food commissioners to report on the implementation of government schemes. So children, for the common person, access to courts is access to justice. The courts exercise a crucial role in interpreting the fundamental rights of citizens, and as you just saw, the courts interpreted Article 21 of the Constitution on the right to life to include the right to food. They therefore ordered the state to take certain steps to provide food for all, including the midday meal scheme. However, there are also court judgments that people believe work against the best interest of the common person. For example, activists who work on issues concerning the right to shelter and housing for the poor believe that the recent judgments on evictions are a far cry from earlier judgments. Children, eviction means removal of persons from homes or lands they are currently living in. While recent judgments tend to view the slum dweller as an encroacher in the city, earlier judgments had tried to protect the livelihoods of slum dwellers. Another issue that affects the common person's access to justice is the inordinately long number of years that courts take to hear a case. The phrase "justice delayed is justice denied" is often used to characterize this extended time period that courts take. However, in spite of this, there is no denying that the judiciary has played a crucial role in democratic India, serving as a check on the powers of the executive and the legislature, as well as in protecting the fundamental rights of citizens. The members of the Constituent Assembly had quite correctly envisioned a system of courts with an independent judiciary as a key feature of our democracy. With this, we come to the end of today's lesson. I hope you understood it well. Now it's time to take up a few questions. First, we have some questions where you have been given some options and you have to choose the correct option. Are you ready? So the first question is, when were high courts first established in India? And your options are 1862, 1950, 1947 or 1962. And the correct option is yes, 1862. Now the next question is, which law deals with harm and injury to rights of individuals? And your options are criminal law, contract law, procedural law or civil law? And the correct option is civil law. The third question is, PILs were first introduced in, and the options are Supreme Court, District Courts, High Courts or Sessions Courts. And the correct option is yes, Supreme Court. Now the next question, which article of the Constitution talks about right to food? And your options are Article 25, Article 21, Article 22 or Article 15. And the correct option is yes, Article 21. Now we have some sentences and you have to tell whether these sentences are true or false. The first sentence is, the accused can take their case to the higher court if he or she is not happy with the decision of the lower court. Is it true, children? Yes, it is true. Now the next sentence is, anyone can take their cases to Supreme Court directly. Is it true or false? It is false. We just talked about appellate system. A person has to first go to the lower court, and if he feels that the judgment given by the court is not just, only then he can go to the higher court. Now let's take up the third sentence. Nobody can go back to the trial court after the verdict of the Supreme Court is final. And this sentence is, yes, it is true. Now the last sentence is, Chief Justice of India sits in the Parliament. This sentence is false because Chief Justice of India sits in the Supreme Court and not in the Parliament. So children, with this we come to the end of today's video. I'm sure you liked it and got to know a great deal about Indian judiciary and its role in our democracy. You also learnt about the structure of courts in India. That's all for today. I'll be back with some more interesting videos. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy.